Hey BookTube, it's Angie. I have another reading the movie to do today. This one's going to be on a little bit of an obscure book, maybe for current generations, I guess. Or current generations, younger generations, I guess. If you're alive, you're a current generation. But yeah, younger generations, I don't think will be familiar with this as much. I came across it by chance in my used bookstore, but that is My Sweet Charlie by David Westheimer. Westheimer? Yes. This was originally, when was this published? It was 1960 something, 65. Originally published in 1965, and then I think they did a TV movie version of it in the 70s. I don't know. I wasn't on the planet then. But I later saw the movie, and I think it starred Patty Duke, and what was the guy's name? Al Freeman Jr. played Charlie in this. So there was a little TV movie that was done. Patty Duke ended up winning an Emmy for it, though. It is available on YouTube as far as I know right now. You can watch. I did a little lookup of this to see what was available on YouTube under this name, and you can watch clips of it. As far as I know, they haven't been taken down yet. If you watch this video and you're curious about this book and you don't mind watching the movie in like 10-minute segments, then you can see this movie from the 70s. This particular edition, I mean, this is probably the edition you'd find it in. I can't imagine they did reprints of this. They might have. This particular one, anyway. We'll go with that. This particular one is in pretty small print, but it is a pretty good story. Basically what this is the story of is this girl Marlene, who is a teenager, and she's in deep south area of the country. For some reason I was thinking it might be around Louisiana area, the way some of the characters speak. I don't know if that's actually said in the book, but something was giving me that impression. But it's 1960s deep south, basically. And Marlene gets pregnant, and at the beginning of the story she has a big fight with her father, and it's been a little bit since I read this, so I can't remember now if she runs away or he throws her out, but either way, she leaves the family home, pregnant, virtually no money on her, basically the clothes on her back, and she just starts walking and ends up coming across this seaside cottage that is unlocked and conveniently unoccupied. I think it's storming at the beginning of the book, so she's running in trying to find a place to get dry and warm, and there's a little Goldilocks scene described in the book. I think they even referenced the Goldilocks story where she's going around and trying things out in the house, and she keeps calling for people to make sure there's nobody in the house, and then she decides she needs to settle in for the night because, you know, she's a pregnant mother. She settles in, and in the beginning of the story, when she finds this house, she only plans to stay one night, but then she gets the next day and thinks, you know, she's looking over her situation, and she's when you're a teenager and you have no money and you're thinking of like prospects and where you're gonna go, and you don't have a car, it's gonna be hard to employ you when you're as far as long as she is, and all of these things, she starts thinking, you know, maybe my best bet is to stay here for a little bit. So she decides to stay at the cottage, at least for a few more days. She has a few dollars on her, not a lot, but a few, and she decides she's going to leave $1 on the table each day that she's there so she can kind of feel like, you know, she's responsible and like renting the place.
In advance. I guess I'll have to owe you.
But she's staying there and living off of the provisions that were in the pantry. It makes it seem like maybe the caretakers have it boarded up for the winter or something like that, because it's not abandoned as far as like it's not falling in on itself, it's just closed up. So she's eating the food that's in the pantry and stuff, and then one day this guy Charlie busts into the house, and he's just trying to get out of the stormy weather himself and get warm, but he startles her so bad that she screams and bites him. And he's startled that she bit him, so he slaps her. But then he feels immediately bad about it because he didn't mean it in an aggressive way. He just was, they both startled each other, basically. And he apologizes, but it's that first impressions thing. It's hard to take back once it goes bad. Once that scene happens, it's really hard for them to get past that. But they eventually do, but it takes a while in the story for them to get past their bias towards each other. It's also 1960s Deep South, like I said. Marlene is a white woman. Charlie is a black man. And it's established pretty early on, once they meet, that they are both coming to each other with cultural and biases and prejudices that were taught into them from their upbringing, especially on Marlene's side. Marlene, I guess I should warn you here, this book is full of N-bombs, at least the beginning of the story, when you first see Marlene and see the environment she grew up in and what her parents taught her about people of a different color than her, and some of the stuff that comes out of her mouth is pretty damn bad. But as some old racist people like to say, it was of the time. It was a different time. At least, like I said, at the beginning of the story. The big push in this story is that she does down the road come to a realization that, maybe your parents or your family you grew up in, maybe they don't know everything. Maybe your church elders or whoever you're growing up around, maybe they don't know everything. Maybe everything comes out of their mouth is not gospel necessarily, but it takes Marlene a while to get there. And Charlie also comes into the picture with his own prejudices. He has his own hang-ups about white people. So they both have to work it out between each other, but they have to work it out because they both need to stay in this place to survive. Because I think this opens up in the winter time. So you can imagine winter time by the coast. It's very bitterly cold. It's just unpleasant, and they both need this place to survive. So they grudgingly help each other at the start, and then the longer they're with each other, the more they start to have a friendship building, and they start to see similarities with each other. And that's basically the gist of the story, is them getting past these biases that have been set up in their minds from their environments, and realizing, oh, we're not so different. And wow, prejudice is really stupid. It's a simple story at its core. There's not a whole lot that happens in the story necessarily. A lot of it just happens at the cottage, but it's more the conversations that happen in this book that are really important. There's a lot of talk that comes up when they're just doing simple things like gathering firewood or fixing dinner or something, when there's nobody else to talk to, they talk to each other and pass the time. And that's when these important conversations of prejudice and racial bias and all of these things come up. They even talk about gender roles and society expectations and all of those things. It's just, you know how it happens with people sometimes when you're talking with them about just general stuff and then somehow it sort of drifts into something kind of serious. That happens a lot in this book. There's one scene in here I thought I would share that kind of illustrates this point nicely, and it's one of the important scenes in the whole novel. There's when I was talking about gender roles and stuff, there was one particular moment in the book where I think they're fixing potatoes or something. I forget if I don't know if they're doing like mashed potatoes. I think they were making French fries. I think that's what it was. I just remember potatoes being involved because of this scene. But I think they want to make French fries. And Marlene is getting out the oil and stuff to cook them on the stovetop. And Charlie makes a comment about how cutting potatoes is women's work. And Marlene fires back, well, if you want to eat tonight, I guess you better learn. And Charlie finds it kind of funny and goes along with it. One of the things I forgot to mention is one of the hard things that Marlene has trouble getting around is she's surprised and a little bit annoyed that Charlie is a well-spoken, educated black man that came from a well-to-do family. That's one of the other conversations that came up, because they're in this kitchen. I think it all happens during this conversation, this dinner they're making this one night. She asks him, she came from a very poor kind of country background, where her knowledge is more like how to handle the farm animals and how to clean up around the house, less so of a formal education than Charlie's had. And when she asks him about that, and she asks, how do you know so little around the house? Didn't anybody ever teach you these things? He mentions, well, the servants always did it. And she stops and looks at him and she said, how do you come from a house that have servants? And he looks at her and he said, like anybody has servants. My dad worked his ass off until he could get to a place where he could provide well for his family, and then we got servants. Like, it's not how everybody does it. And she just can't get over the fact that this black man has had all of these opportunities as far as like servants and good education, and he knows all these big words, and it just gets under her skin. So that kind of plays into this scene as well, where she's cutting up potatoes and getting them ready for dinner. And then he says he wants to do an experiment with the potatoes. And that's where this scene I wanted to share picks up. Because it's not just about the potatoes. There's a bigger conversation happening here. I had to get my drink into a better location because my throat keeps drying out. They're fixing dinner. Marlene's showing him how to cut a potato properly. And it says, she peeled a potato deftly in one long, unbroken spiral, an accomplishment which she had always been proud of, dipped the potato pieces in the basin of water, and swiftly cut it into frying-sized pieces. Robert watched, fascinated. It was the first time since his childhood he had paid such close attention to a kitchen chore. He was impressed by Marlene's dexterity. Her practiced movements reminded him a little of his mother's, though Marlene's were less deliberate. The comparison annoyed him almost as much as her mastery of a useful function at which he was so inadequate. See how? Marlene had said. Peeling potatoes is women's work, he said sullenly. Well, if you want fried potatoes tonight, you better start learning women's work then, unless you're not smart enough to. It's not a matter of brains, he said. He began sullenly and painstakingly to peel potatoes. From time to time, Marlene sent a sly look his way, and once caught him trying unsuccessfully to make the spiral as she had done. He sure looks just plain nigger right now, she thought. Even got his bottom lip pushed out. She wondered if she should say that out loud, and decided against it. No use getting him any madder than he was. He might start making fun of her again, and she would lose her advantage. He had not peeled nearly enough potatoes by the time the shortening was hot, so she pared the knife down. So she took the paring knife down from his willing fingers and finished the job for him. When she had finished frying the potatoes and draining them on paper towels from the cupboard, she divided them scrupulously and took her plate to the drain board as usual. "Why don't you sit down at the table like a civilized human being?" Roberts asked, "even if you're not." Roberts is Charlie's last name. "I'm fine right here. Just 'cause I sat down with you talking don't mean I want to go and sit down with you to eat," she thought. "Look, Marlene," Roberts said with a trace of a smile, "if it's because you don't feel you're good enough to eat with me." She flushed angrily. "You think you're so smart." He was silent for a few seconds and then asked with disarming courtesy, "Will you do me a favor?" "What kind of favor?" she demanded suspiciously. "Eat a piece of potato for me." What? Why?" "I want to try a scientific experiment." "Don't you like scientific experiments?" "Not especially." She shrugged and picked up a piece of fried potato. She dipped it in the pool of ketchup she had poured on her plate and ate it self-consciously under his intense scrutiny. "Didn't you ever see nobody eat fried potatoes before?" she demanded. "Not scientifically. Now just sit over there." He pointed across the table to the chair where she had sat before. Marlene hesitated. "It's a scientific experiment," he coaxed. "Don't you want to help the cause of science?" Mystified and curious, she brought her plate to the table and sat down, her back unnaturally straight and her arms tense. "Now, Dr. Chambers," he said with mock solemnity, "select a potato of approximately the same proportions and degree of crispness as the specimen previously consumed." "What?" "This is a very scientific experiment. We must do it scientifically." Again, he watched her intently as she dipped the piece of potato in ketchup and munched it. "Now," he said gravely, "for the most important part of the experiment. How does the potato taste?" "Real good." "How did the second potato taste?" "It was good too." "Real good?" "Yes, real good." "I see. So would it be correct to say then that if the first potato tasted real good and the second potato tasted real good, one might conclude that there was no difference in taste between them?" "Huh?" "In simpler terms, did they taste exactly alike?" "Of course they did. They cooked the same." QED. He waited expectantly for her to ask him to explain. Instead, she said, "I know what that means, QED. We had it in geometry." "What does it mean?" he asked, disappointed. "It means that proves it," she said proudly. "Close enough." "Proves what?" she said. "I mean, what did the experiment prove?" "It proves a French fried potato tastes the same whether eaten standing or sitting." "Well, anybody knows that." "I haven't finished. Even if the eater happens to be sitting across from a Negro." Marlene stared at her plate. She was aware that she had been tricked and made a fool of again, and she was more confused than chagrined. She felt tricked, but not only by Roberts, but by everyone who had contributed to her certainty that it was wrong, even indecent, to eat at the same table with a Negro. She had been so certain that it was wrong that she had never even considered what the consequence of such an act might be, because she'd never dreamed she would have to face the consequence. And now she had done it, and there were no consequences. Nothing. She was just sitting there, and he was sitting there, and that was all. It wasn't fair, she thought. It was like going to a 4th of July picnic to see the fireworks, and then, when it got dark and the time came, being told there weren't any. "Anybody knows that doesn't change the taste," she said weakly. "There must be a good reason why it's so dangerous to eat with a Negro," Roberts insisted. "If it's not that it makes the food taste bad, it must be something else. Maybe it has to do with digestion. How do you feel?" "Feel fine," Marlene said peevishly. "No heartburn, nausea, flatulence." "I told you I feel fine," she said, wondering what flatulence meant. "Maybe later then, when it reaches the intestinal tract. That's when the trouble may start." Marlene looked at him coldly. "You purely do love to hear yourself talk, don't you?" she said. "I'm merely trying to enlighten you," he said, stiffly, knowing that she was right and resenting it. "The potatoes are getting cold," she said matter-of-factly, bending over her plate. "I think that was it," and then they just go on. I think that was the bulk of the important part of the conversation, and then they just go on to continue dinner. But I guess at this point I'll show you what that particular scene looked like in the movie.
When was the last time you had the wax cleaned out of your ears? I said I'd cook 'em if you peel 'em.
Well, that sounds equitable.
Equitable?
Fair.
Equitable means fair? Why didn't you say fair then? I thought you were supposed to be peeling. When you counting on doing it?
Well, where's the peeler?
If you ain't the most helpless. Here. Now I suppose you want me to work your hands for you like one of them puppets? I swear. Looks like you never peeled a potato before in your whole
My
life.
mother always did it. Or the maid.
Maid? Where'd y'all get enough money to have a maid?
Where does anybody get money? My father earned it.
Well, was he an undertaker?
A what?
Well, they make lots of money, colored undertakers.
Boy, I really picked one.
All right, what was he then, a preacher?
He was a brand manager for a distilling company.
A what for a what?
He was in charge of sales and promotion for a brand of whiskey.
Whiskey. No wonder he was so rich, the way you people like to drink it.
Well, now, wouldn't it be ironic if it was my old man's brand your old man got stoned on every Saturday night?
My daddy? He don't allow a sinful drop of whiskey in the house.
Oh, he's one of those, huh? What does this daddy of yours do?
Farms. He's got 200 acres of bottomland so rich you could eat it with a spoon. And 2 tractors and a cultivator and I don't know what all else. What potato famine?
Didn't they teach you anything down here?
They teach me plenty.
Well, in the 1880s, the Irish potato crop was virtually destroyed by blight, which led to widespread starvation.
You don't have to act so smart about it. I swear I ain't never seen anybody with so many airs.
If you said ain't less often, you wouldn't sound so ignorant.
I know there ain't no such word as ain't. I just can't help saying it. But I do know what potato blight is. And rust and rot and pip.
Pip.
Chickens get it.
Well, live and learn. Why don't you sit down at the table like a civilized human being?
I'm doing just fine right here, thank you.
Do me a favor.
What kind of favor?
Eat a potato for me.
Eat up. Why?
Well, I want to try a scientific experiment. You like scientific experiments, don't you?
Not especially.
Well, let's try one anyway. Breaks the monotony. Okay? Eat a potato.
Ain't you never seen nobody eat a potato before?
Not scientifically. Now, sit down over there. Well, don't you want to help the cause of science? Now, Dr. Chambers, select a potato of approximately the same proportions and degree of crispness as the potato previously consumed.
Huh?
Eat a potato. You've got the ketchup. most important part of the experiment. How did the first potato taste?
Real good.
And the second?
It was good too.
Then, we can assume there was no difference in taste between them.
Well, of course there wasn't. They was cooked exactly alike.
QED.
I know what that means. We had it in geometry. Means that proves it.
Well,
Proves what? I mean, what did the experiment prove?
that a French fried potato tastes the same whether eaten standing or sitting.
Anybody knows that.
Even if the eater happens to be sitting across from a black man.
They're getting cold.
I think one thing this story does really well is it points out not only the stupidity of prejudice as far as the rules people give to make their irrational thought make sense and justified. Not only that, but it also points out the hypocrisy that a lot of racists use. For example, there's points in the early part of the book where Marlene refers to Charlie as a boy a lot, largely to get a rise out of him, even though he's older than she is. But at the same time, she gets offended whenever he gets mad at her and calls her white trash. And she's just appalled that he would say such a thing to her, and he's kind of like, it doesn't feel so good, does it? And a lot of their fights in the book do get a little bit childish, but at the same time, there's also a lot that important that's brought up. So definitely a good read if you can find it. I don't know if libraries would have this necessarily, since it's an older one, and it seems like libraries these days they don't really have much interest in carrying books that are too old. Maybe you could try online sites like Amazon, eBay, Thrift Books, Better World Books, something like that. Or if you just happen to spot it in one of your local secondhand shops, I would definitely recommend at least giving this one read and seeing what you think. The movie version, it was a little bit romanticized in parts because it was done in the 1970s, so I think the beach cottage was upgraded to in the story it's near the lighthouse. Here it's actually the lighthouse keeper's cottage in the film. And then also there's, because it's the 1970s, there's a lot of those, what would you call them? Like the artistic montages with the long sappy music and people's, the ladies' long hair blowing in the wind, looking pensive and all of that stuff, and the sort of like, what is that I don't even know what the word is to call it, but it's like that look that 70s films have, where it's like they shot it through some sort of wispy haze or something. I don't know. It has a lot of that like romanticized look to it from that aspect. Okay, guys. So yeah, the battery pack on my camera died again. So I just want to do this on my phone so that I don't lose momentum and try to do this, a day or two after the fact and forget what I was talking about. I only had a little bit left to say. The characters, there are some changes in the characters as well, as far as their actual characterization from the novel to the book. There are some scenes where Al Freeman, I think that's his name, the guy that plays Charlie in the movie, there are some scenes where he plays him a little bit harder than Charlie is actually written in the story, and then I think there are also scenes where he plays him softer than Charlie was in the book. One of the scenes, for instance, like I mentioned, the slap scene at the beginning, where when Charlie first bursts in and he startles Marlene, and Marlene screams and bites him, and then Charlie is startled by the fact that she bit him, so he slaps her and then immediately apologizes. In the movie, it's done a little bit differently. The emphasis makes it look more like the bias is different in the movie, where it makes it look more like Charlie is just a crazy angry black man in the movie, because he like I said in the story, he's very apologetic. It's in the moment. You know, we've all had those situations where you're startled by something, and so you overreact because you're startled, and you don't mean anything by it other than it was like your gut reaction to do that, and then you immediately apologize. That's all it was in the book. But in the movie, they played it as Charlie was just this crazy black man that broke in the house, and then Marlene is running and screaming all these derogatory names, and then he slaps her to stop her from doing that. But then he's much less apologetic about it in the movie. He's just like, oh, whatever, that's that's what you get. And I was a little bit bothered by that, but it's almost like a movie about prejudice had its own prejudice. It was kind of weird. But on that same topic, Patty Duke ended up playing Marlene a lot softer than Marlene is written in the story. Although when you watch it, she does play the hard racist in the beginning, but even the way Patty Duke played it, it's still softer than Marlene is in the beginning of the book. So there's a little bit of nuance or difference, I guess, in some of the way the characters are portrayed. But it's still, whether you go with the book or the novel, I would suggest trying both of them. Sorry, I'm shaking so much. I don't have like an actual holder for the book, for the phone. I just have the word book in my head. But I would suggest trying both because they're both pretty good. The movie especially, even if it's a 70s movie, it surprisingly sucks you in the way the acting is done. There's just, it's, even for a TV movie, there's really good acting in that show. And I tried to include some of the better clips from it so you can see it for yourself. But Patty Duke ended up winning an Emmy for her performance in this. And I watched her acceptance speech, and it was a little bit odd. I hadn't watched it before. And when I went and read around more, like the history behind this movie and the awards and all of that, I found out that apparently when the Emmys aired that year, there was a lot of talk about that Emmy speech because it was really bizarre. But then I read later that it came out that her behavior, well, I'll show you a clip of it in a minute, but her behavior was really weird and her speech was really drawn out, so people had the impression that she was drugged out. And then I read later that the way the camera was angled, the pauses didn't capture her hands on camera, and she was actually signing part, like ASL, like sign language signing, part of her speech, and that's what the pauses were, is she was actually doing ASL on camera, but the way the camera was set up, it didn't catch what her hands were doing. And it was also during a time where she was trying to get over a very low period. She struggled a lot with manic depression, and she was in a very low point in her life at the time of that award ceremony, and it was said that that's what she was struggling with. She had a lot going on that she was trying to fight through and still look relatively normal to the public eye, and it looked imbalanced. But people just assumed, oh, well, she was just crazy and on drugs. And I think I read that she did have points in her life where she did struggle with some substance abuse or alcoholism or something like that, but that wasn't necessarily the case with the award speech. But I thought I would include it in case, you like film history and want to see that sort of thing. So I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about for that. Sorry, this video is a little bit choppy. One day I'm gonna get a decent camera. I mean, this video camera I do most of my videos on, it's served me well. I've had it for the bulk of my years on YouTube, but I don't know, maybe it's starting to give out. But we will do the best we can until we can upgrade the technology, right? Okay, guys, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. We will talk soon. Bye, guys.
And the winner is, in Los Angeles, Patty Duke for My Sweet Charlie.
Thank you. You. And Damien Evans. I know you're over there somewhere. You. Mom. Happy birthday. I've also been taught not to, say thank you for too long. But the best words I've ever learned were hello, enthusiasm, and thank you.
Are you Christian? I think it's about time we had a little chat.
What about?
A subject of mutual interest.
There ain't no such thing.
I want to leave. But I can't if you're going to run right out to report I was here.
I won't. I swear I won't. Cross my heart and hope to die.
You are a Christian.
Well, of course I'm a Christian. Everybody's a Christian.
How would you know? You ever see a black face in your church?
You got your own churches.
You burn them down.
I don't know nothing about that.
I bet you don't.
I don't. Why are you always blaming me for everything? And what's my being a Christian got to do with anything?
Well, it has to do with my leaving. I want you to swear on the Bible. Are you willing?
Sure, I'm willing.
Do you believe your word is sacred, even though it's given to a black man?
What do you think I am? I don't give my word to no Negro or anybody else less than I expect to keep it.
Negro? Well, I guess I'm getting up in the world. Put your left hand on the Bible. And raise your right hand here. Half that much will do just fine. Now repeat after me. I swear on the Holy Bible.
I swear on the Holy Bible
That I will not tell anyone.
that I will not tell anyone
At any time.
at any time.
That Charles Roberts was here.
That's your name, ain't it?
Isn't it? And you better forget it. Put your hand back in the Bible.
That Charles Roberts was here.
Nor will I communicate with anyone concerning him.
Nor will I try to communicate with... You know, this sounds just like you was reading it out of a book.
Nor will I...
Nor will I try to communicate with anyone concerning him, so help me God. When are you leaving?
I really am gonna miss you. Now is as good a time as any. But I need a warmer coat. That store you mentioned, Treadwell's, where is it?
Mile and a half down the road. What are you doing here? Why'd you come back?
Because I got within speaking distance of a shotgun. Your friend Treadwell was doing a little late shopping. He came in with both barrels blazing.
Why'd you have to come back here? Why can't you go someplace else?
Because there is no place else.
All right. So you came back. Don't mean you gotta stay. Wait till it's dark and try again.
Every sheriff in the county out on the prowl, hmm?
Just because somebody broke into Mr. Treadwell's, they wouldn't take the trouble.
They would if that somebody were me, so get it through your ignorant head. I'm staying.
And after I swore on the Bible.
Well, everybody has his cross, little Miss White Lady.
I don't like when you call me that, so stop it.
Propriety dictates I call you something. What is your name, anyway?
None of your business.
No? After we've lived together in the same house?
We have not either lived together.
I beg your pardon. After we've habited the same house. What's your name, Miss White Lady?
Marlene. Marlene Chambers.
Wow. How did that happen? I thought you people went in for Emmy Lou and Sally Joe.
For your information, I was named after my great-great-grandmother. She had a big place in Atlanta.
Great-great-grandmother. I never knew the name of my great-great-grandmother. Probably Mammy or something.
That's all you ever think about, ain't it?
What?
Being a nigger. Well, don't blame me. It ain't my fault you're black.
Well, that tends to imply you think I'd rather be white.
Well, wouldn't you?
If I were white, you think I'd be a better man?
Sure couldn't be no worse. We're almost out of food. Looks to me like somebody's been gobbling like a hog.
Exactly what I've been thinking. Where do you put it all?
At least I paid for what I ate.
You pay, huh?
You're so smart. Where'd you think that came from?
You mean that's your money?
Certainly ain't nobody else's. At least it was mine. I put $1 in every day till I didn't have none left. And that's a lot more than you did. And I wash my own dishes.
Well, I'll be.
You see something green? How come you keep looking at me like that?
Well, because you, interest me. No, you really do. Here all alone, as if you have no place else to go. Got ourselves pregnant, didn't we? And I thought you was such an innocent little girl. Stupid, but innocent. My apologies, little mother. I mean for thinking you were too ugly for anybody to look at. Somebody did a lot more than just look, though, didn't they? Hmm?
He was big and sweet and smarter than you. And if he was here, he'd teach you to talk to me that way.
But he's not here, is he? And why?
None of your business.
They tell me around here it takes 4 things to make a marriage. Preacher, 2 witnesses, and a shotgun. That daddy of yours, didn't he have a shotgun? Kicked you out, didn't he? Well, didn't he?
I hate you!
Marlene! Note yourself!
What'd you steal?
Potatoes.
Sweet or light?
Sweet or light?
Sweet potatoes or Irish potatoes, don't you know anything?
How do you expect me to know what you call Irish potatoes down here?
You don't like it when somebody talks to you the way you talk to them, do you?
Many an Irishman would have killed for this during the potato famine. Baked. I'd like to have it baked with butter and chives and sour cream.
Sour cream? Ugh. When our cream clabbered, we threw it to the pigs.
Well, we don't have any butter, so we can't have them baked. We could boil them. What other way is there?
French fry.
Are you trying to tell me you can make French fried potatoes?
Well, of course I can. But you weren't counting on me cooking for you, were you?
If you want some, you will.
I don't cook for no